So far, a lot of my examples and a lot of what we talked about with respect to composition has been in the context of outdoors, landscapes, and that sort of thing. And partly that's just because I do a lot of that. So today what I want to do is go in a different direction with respect to this and talk about photographing people. Now, I'm not going to turn you into a fashion photographer or even a portrait photographer, and that's not really what I'm aiming to do here, but rather to show you some tips for improving your pictures of people, because everybody takes pictures of their friends and everybody takes pictures of their family, and so how can we make these better? The first thing I want you to do is fill the frame. And this is such a simple thing, but it's a way that it's something most people don't do when they're starting out. They want to put a lot of background and a lot of context in their picture. And I want you to get away from that. People are very perceptive. They can tell where things are taken with very small cues. And in any event, what they usually care about much more is the person. So spend a lot of effort forcing yourself to fill the frame with that person. The next thing I want you to do is get beyond the standard smiling at the camera picture. There's a place for these. These are great. You know, we want pictures of people smiling for the camera. But to do something interesting, we need to get beyond that. And so try to capture people doing something or expressing some emotion. Let's talk about doing something first. The best way I've found to sort of capture this is when you pick up your camera, say to the person, just keep doing what you're doing, assuming they're doing something interesting. Because a lot of times people will have this tendency to stop what they're doing and look towards the camera and smile, because that's what they've been trained they should be doing. So tell them, just keep doing what you're doing, and I think you'll end up with some better shots that way. The next thing you want to do is really look for emotion, and that's really what you're after here, is capturing some emotion when you capture a person. So look for that. Then, with respect to the things around them, look for interesting lines and angles to add to your picture. That's the next tip, because that will add interest to just a standard shot of a person as well. Finally, and we haven't talked about this yet, but we're about to, is take multiple shots. Don't just machine gun, but take multiple shots, different angles, look for the decisive moment, look for the best angle and the best shot of this person. So taking multiple shots is really a huge thing to do in this regard. Keep in mind you're going to throw most of them away. It's digital, it's free, you might as well take several. It increases your odds quite a bit. Now let's talk about actual shooting tips to improve these compositions as well. And this is kind of taking us back to some of the things we've talked about earlier in the course, but they impact what we're doing here, so I really want to talk about them again. Which is, remember when you're shooting a person, the focus is always on the eyes. The near eye, if they're not on the same plane. This is a surefire way to ruin your picture if you don't do this, so I just want to bring that back into the discussion again. Then you can use a large aperture, and that's a reason why that focus and is such an important thing. The subject is your person. You really don't care about the background, and it's kind of a distraction. So a shallow depth of field is a good thing. The next thing is you want to use a relatively fast shutter speed when you're shooting people. And so this wide aperture will help that. If you're using this wide aperture, it's letting a lot of light in, and that way you don't have to keep the shutter open as long. So that's good. Why is it that you want to use a faster shutter speed? Because you want to avoid any movement in people, and you'll be surprised at how fast people move and how much movement there is. That even a shutter speed you might think is pretty fast, like 1/15 of a second, 1/30 of a second, you're going to want to go faster. And that's especially true, of course, if they're actually doing something like semi-athletic or with a lot of movement involved. So use a wide aperture, use a fast shutter speed, focus on the eyes, and that'll go a long way towards getting your shots of people done correctly. Remember, this is a key time when you're going to be using flash. Be sure you bounce the flash or diffuse the flash or tone down the flash or something like that. You don't want a sort of harsh, artificial look to these pictures, so That really super important. And remember too, I know this is counterintuitive, so I want to say it again, is that the closer the light source is, the softer the light is. So keep that in mind. One thing to remember as well is that you can enhance these in post. Now, if you use a flash and you've done things correctly, you're going to be surprised at how little post-processing these need. But there are some things you can do to enhance them. There's two I want to talk about in particular. The first is any blemishes of any sort in a person you get rid of. We've talked already in this course about removing distractions, and as part of that lesson I showed you the spot healing brush, and so you might want to make liberal use of that here to get rid of anything that is an imperfection or even looks like one in this scene. Another thing I'll walk you through is how to add a little blur. Rather than describe the process for adding blur to your pictures, I thought it would be best to show you. So here I am in Lightroom, and I'm in the Develop module, and I have this picture of my daughter Hannah. There's no blemishes or anything I need to remove like that, but I am going to show you the process for adding a little blur to the skin anyway. You don't want to add it everywhere, so what you'll do is go grab your adjustment brush here, and then what to do is grab this clarity slider and pull it to the left. The more you pull it to the left, the more you're decreasing the clarity. The reason you're doing that is that there is no blur slider or anything like that in Lightroom. I suppose you could pull down dehaze and or sharpness as well, but I think you'll get the best results with clarity. And then all you do is size your brush using your bracket keys and make it something like that, and then you just paint it in like that, and that adds the blur or lack of clarity wherever you want it. So that's how you do it in Lightroom. Let me now show you how to do it in Photoshop. So we'll take our picture into Photoshop, and here we are. In Photoshop there is a blur filter which we're going to use, but we'll come back to that. First we're going to make a new layer, press Ctrl J, and then go add your blur. I usually use Gaussian blur. And you'll see what happens is it's adding it to the entire picture. And that's okay for now because we're going to mask it off. So just go ahead and add however much you want. I'll just say this much just to make it quick. And as you can see, it's added it everywhere. What you'll do now is add a layer mask. If you press this button here, it'll add a layer mask, but it's adding a reveal all layer mask, which shows the effect everywhere, and that's not what I want. So I will delete that. And then I will add one by pressing the Alt key while I press this button, and it will add a hide all layer mask. Now it's hidden everywhere except where I want it. What I'll do is grab my brush tool over here, make sure my color is to white, set my opacity at whatever I want it, and I usually do something reasonably low and then blend it in. Okay, so I'll zoom in a little bit, and now what I'll do is simply paint it in like that. And you'll just do this to whatever extent you want, and you can change the size of your brush with the left and right bracket keys, paint it in, and then voila, you're done. Now let's head back to resume the discussion on improving your pictures in post. In Lightroom or Photoshop, you may want to add some sharpening, some clarity, and some brightness to the eyes and to the teeth to really enhance those and make them look their best. Okay, we might as well do a quick tutorial on selectively brightening and sharpening as well, since we were just talking about eyes and teeth. I'm going to spend a lot of time showing you how to brighten areas and sharpen areas later on in this course, but here will be a really quick fly through while we're on the topic. In Lightroom, we'll start with the same picture. We're in our Develop module, and I'm again going to use the adjustment brush. Here, I'm going to want to brighten things, so I might increase my exposure a little, I might increase the highlights a little, and probably pull the clarity up a little as well. You could add sharpness or even dehaze as well. A key thing to do is make sure that this auto mask box is checked. That will give you some guidance when you are adding the selection or adding the adjustment to a particular area. It'll keep it from spilling over into other areas. All I'll do now is set my brush size, and then I'm going to simply paint it in where I want it, and I want it in the eyes here, and I will add it to the teeth as well to brighten those a little bit. And so once you're done with that, you can then selectively add however you want and go back, and you can get as fine with this or as dramatic with this as you want. I'm just adding a little bit for now very quickly to show you how it's done. So that's how you do it in Lightroom very quickly. Now let's run into Photoshop and see it there. Okay, here we are in Photoshop, and I have our same picture. What I'm going to do now is really just fly through this because I'm going to show you these tools much more in depth later in the course. All I'm going to do here is go to the Curves Adjustment Layer icon and press that. It will call up the Curves Adjustment Layer and automatically add a layer mask. What I'll do is then make my adjustment. So here I'll pull the line up to add a little brightness to things. And then what I'm going to do is mask it off. I'm going to convert this mask into a hide all mask so it hides the effect everywhere. What I'll do there is just press Control-I, and that gets rid of it. Now you can see my layer mask is black, and now I can just go paint it in. So I'll grab my brush again, make sure my color is set to white, check my opacity, 22% seems okay, set my brush size, and now I can just paint this in to whatever extent I want. Something like that. And you can press on your eyeball to see before and after. Now I'm going to do the same thing to the teeth as well. I'll do another Curves Adjustment layer, and I will make an adjustment here, make it a little brighter. And what I'll do here as well is go to blue and increase that. What you'll find is that everyone's teeth in the world have a little bit of yellow to them. So by adding blue, you negate that. And in fact, the reason I'm using this picture of my daughter, who is an 18-year-old girl, is that everything is fine here. And so you can see that if she can be improved, then virtually anyone can. Now we have this, we will press Control-I to hide it everywhere. Again, brush, white, low opacity, and now paint it in. And I'm just doing this really quick just so you can kind of see it. And again, we'll cover these tools later on. So there's before and after. Just a really quick job to show you. You could also add a saturation layer as well and do the same thing and increase saturation to the eyes or to the lips or whatever you want. But you can see in general how this is done. So these are the most common enhancements you'll make to photos. But with that said, let's head back to the lecture now and get today's assignment. Now let's talk about today's assignment. What I want you to do is capture someone's character, and here's how you're going to do it. Spend 20 minutes photographing someone you know, whether a friend or family member. Capture them doing something or showing some kind of emotion. The key is that you want to do something beyond just your standard portrait of them looking at the camera or smiling at the camera or something like that. You're trying to get a glimpse into this person's life. Now, this is going to tax you a little bit because it's going to require that you use a lot of things we've talked about throughout this course. Composition, exposure, lighting, and everything else. So go ahead and spend some time with it. But when you do, you should end up at this point in the course with a portrait that you're really proud of. So take your time, have some fun, and good luck.